call it Tails. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. You've reached chapter 24 of Tarot Tales, a weekly gathering where I tell a little-known fairy tale based on a randomly drawn tarot card week to week. Those of you that have been following along know that this week we are talking about the Five of Pentacles. And before I dive into kind of the classic divination of this card, I'd love to give you just a moment to pause, reflect, comment, or chat what kinds of things this card brings up for you. What do you notice when you see this card? What symbolism stands out to you? If you were going to describe this card to another person, what would you say the mood is? For me, this is one of the cards that originally really attracted or stood out to me, attracted to me in the actual tarot set. Because much like I think it's the Nine of Wands, that is really kind of gritting, kind of despairing, really tragic. Now, I was really surprised to learn that the divination of this card is mostly this idea of not knowing, not recognizing the good fortune that's around you, which is really surprising to me because I think that I think of tarot card divination as like kind of a very pagan thing, but it has a lot to do with this kind of church setup that we've got here. So we have barefoot, someone that is on crutches here, so physically not in a good spot to handle the weather. We've got this warm church right in front of them that they could potentially go inside and seek refuge in. Now, that's a pretty favorable view of a church here. You know, maybe they've got their own reasons, but that's typically what the read for one of these actually is referring to. Now, if we flip this upside down, then it means that maybe we do recognize the church that's inside. We see the possibility that's in front of us. We feel a little less helpless, and we actually have kind of a general direction that we can head towards. So we drew this upside down, and that's what the story that we're going to focus on is today. Thinking that maybe you are all out of sorts and you don't know where you're supposed to go, and then finding your way throughout the myths. To drink alongside of that this week, I have the Viper's Venom, which is a take on the New York Sour. We're going to see how this is. I'm pretty proud of the float job that I did here, but let's give it a taste. Oh, I was terrified it had curdled, but that was just the lemon twist. Not bad. I'm going to say not bad. Those of you that aren't drinking, you've got the Garden Sour. And whether or not you're joining me with a cocktail or not, to you for joining me live or later, I say a hearty cheers. Now, before we dive into the actual story this week, a couple of things to point out. So first of all, the story today I listed as from Myanmar, and the text I found it from was a list of Burmese folktales. And so I was like, what's going on with the title? So for really up until 1989, the country was referred to as Burma. And then the government renamed itself Myanmar. Most Burmese people, it seems, still refer to it as Burma, and it's kind of dually listed in a number of different places. You may have heard of this in the news more recently, specifically news related to the Rohingya. So there's like a whole very complicated geopolitical backstory that I really recommend you go and do a deep dive on that I'm not going to try and dig into. But the other thing that's worth pointing out for this week's story is that there is like a heavy reverence for snakes in the kind of proto culture there. This idea of a naga or a like half snake, half human deity exists. And we're going to hear that referenced a couple of times in the story this week. So that's basically all I've got. And so without further ado, let us dive into chapter 24. The Five of Pentacles and The Snake Prince. Once upon a time, there was a devoted old woman whose loving husband died and left her with 3 beautiful daughters. The woman cared for her family deeply and was too proud to ask for help, and so continued to provide for her family week after week and year after year. And every day, her path was roughly the same. She would go into the forest and chop down a tree. She would chop that tree into little pieces, and then she would sell that firewood to provide for her family. And on her way home, she would collect everything that was forageable and grab all of the fruits that were available to her on her way home. Over time, she became accustomed to collecting the many figs that fell from one specific fig tree. And on this day, on her way home, she noticed that there were no figs lying underneath the fig tree that she had come to rely upon. "What? Who took my figs?" she cried, and looked all around, trying to find who the culprit might be. And then she heard from above a loud hissing, "Sss," with a glaring snake eye. "Oh, Lord Naga, I'm so sorry. I rely on this fig tree to feed my family. I was wondering if you might consider to allow me some of the figs you have in your coils." For indeed, the snake had grabbed all the figs in the tree and had them tightly wound within the coils of its body. The snake stopped hissing, but glared at the old woman. "I happen to have 3 lovely daughters who need those figs. Would you be interested in perhaps marrying my eldest, Ma Yu, in exchange for a fig?" At this, Lord Naga uncoiled one coil and let a fig drop to the ground. The widow got excited. "What about my middle daughter, Ma Lat? Would you be interested in marrying her for a fig?" Lord Naga again uncoiled a coil and dropped a fig to the ground. The widow's so excited at this point. All right, maybe she's going to be able to feed her family. "Oh, Lord Naga, perhaps you would be willing to marry my youngest daughter, Ma Tui, for a few more figs." At this, the snake uncoiled entirely, dropping all of the figs to the ground, and beat its tail against the tree, releasing hundreds more figs to the ground. The widow was so excited, she cried with glee, "Hee hee!" and filled her bag filled with all of the figs that she could. And then, before the snake had a chance to respond or say anything else, she ran away. She ran, panting as fast as she could, looking behind her occasionally to make sure the snake was not chasing her, until she came upon a tree stump. As she was walking by that tree stump, she didn't pay it any mind, but the tree stump said to her as she passed, "Hey, hey, those are some nice figs you got there." The widow said, "Yes, they are, and you can have one of them if you promise not to tell the snake that's following me that you've seen me." The tree stump agreed, and she dropped a fig with the tree stump. She continued to run along until she passed a boulder. And as she passed the boulder, she didn't pay it any mind as it rolled away. She didn't pay it any mind, but the boulder said to her, "Hey, those are some nice figs you've got there." And the widow said, "Yes, they are. And I'll give you one of them if you tell the snake that's following me that you didn't see me." The boulder agreed, and she gave him a fig. The widow continued to run. She was going so close to her house that she had to go up the little hill. In this story, it's called a hillock. I've never heard this, a hillock. Additional little vocab word. She was running over the hill when the hill cried out to her, "Hello, those are some nice figs. Would you be willing to give me one of them?" The widow said, "Only if you tell the snake that's following me that you haven't seen me." The hill agreed. She dropped a fig and continued on. The widow finally gets to her house. She collapses to the ground, thinking she's outsmarted the snake, and chuckles to herself as she eats a few figs for herself and goes about the rest of her day. Little did she know, however, that the snake that she had seen had noticed her and her family before, and he had fallen in love with Mahtwe and was secretly very excited about this whole journey and knew exactly how to get to her house. And so he continued on her path, passing a tree stump, asking the tree stump, "Do you know if there was a woman that went this way?" The tree stump said, "No." The snake said, "You're a liar! Where did you get that fig then?" The tree stump passed out with fear. The snake continued along to a boulder and said, "By the way, have you happened to see a old woman pass this way?" The boulder said, "No." And the snake said, "Liar! Where did you get that delicious fig then?" And the boulder laid down in fear. The snake continued on until they passed a large hill, the hillock, and said, "By the way, have you happened to see a widow pass by this way?" The hill said, "No." And the snake said, "Liar! Where did you get that nice fig then?" And then the hill passed out, terrified of the snake. The snake finds its way to the old woman's house, sneaks its way into a bag of rice, and lies flat. The widow, after having laughed and eaten her fill of figs, decided it was time to make her daughter's dinner, and went to go and make a bag of rice, when suddenly the snake popped up at her. "Oh, Lord Naga, I'm so sorry. You tried to betray me." The widow said, "Oh, no, no, absolutely not. Of course I didn't. Oh, no. I ran home to prepare my daughters to wed you because they're so excited and because I'm so excited." The snake continued to glare, but said nothing else. The woman said, "Give me a second while I gather my daughters for a brief conversation. We were just in the middle of things, and I said I was going to make some rice." So the snake sat by as the woman called in her daughters, Ma Yu, Ma Lat, and Ma Tui. She pulls her daughters in and explains what had happened earlier that morning, and asked in succession if each of them would be willing to marry the snake. Ma Yu said, "Oh my God, what? No, of course not. Why would I marry a snake?" Ma Lat said, No, surely there's some way that we can trick the snake and get out of whatever fig promise that you made." And Ma Tui said, "Of course, mother. I will marry the snake if you are in danger, and I will treat him as dutifully as I would a true husband." Whew, the widow breathed a sigh of relief. And that very night, she had the snake sat down in the same bag of rice and set it under Ma Tui's bed. And Ma Tui went to bed with the snake underneath her. And in the middle of the night, she had the strangest dream that a beautiful prince crawled out from underneath her bed, got into bed, and held her very tight. This dream happened the second night and the third night until she told her mother what was going on. Her mother said, "Oh, that's very odd. I'll go ask the astrologer." But she did not. What the widow did instead was hide in Mathwe's room and watch late into the night, when she saw that from the snake's basket a handsome prince appeared from the basket, crawled into Mathwe's bed, and held her tight. She went over, grabbed the basket, looked inside, and saw the snake skin. It is exactly what she thought. The snake was Lord Naga indeed. So she took the snake skin to the fire and threw it in. Cried Lord Naga as he ran into the kitchen, his skin covered in red and blistering. Matway followed them in, said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" Lord Naga said, "Your mother guessed correctly that I am the Snake Prince. But now she has burnt my skin and I am mortal. I will have to spend the rest of my life with you. And though that will be a great pleasure for me, I will one day die. However, if it is with you, I will be happy for the rest of my life." And the two embraced and continued to fall asleep and have happily ever after nights. Part 2. Well, you can imagine that Ma Lat and Ma Yu were very unhappy to see the harmonious marriage of Ma Tui and Lord Naga. So much so that they began to conspire against Ma Tui. They kept trying to get her to come out under nefarious circumstances. So, Lord Naga and Ma Tui moved to the top of a hill, overlooking the sea, with a large fence all around them so that the sisters could not bother them and they no longer needed to see their mother. It wasn't before long that they had a child that they named Qin Shui, and the three of them were very happy, except for Lord Naga. Each day he would go and collect reeds that Ma Tui would then weave into baskets and sell to the general community in order to make some passive income for the family. But Lord Naga felt bad about this. Feeling that he was a prince, he felt like he should be able to provide more. And one day, a merchant ship came to town, and Lord Naga got the idea that, I've got it. In order to be able to provide you the rubies and glass slippers and all of the magical things that a princess should be able to have, I will become a merchant of the seas. I will disappear, collect my money, and then come back to provide for each of you. Ma Tui was very upset at this idea, saying, oh, please don't do that. We're happy with you. We're happy with our lives. You don't need to go and achieve. But Lord Naga could not be stopped. So he spent a few days gathering rice, water, dried fish, all of the things that they could possibly need for several months, and brought them all within the confines of the house that he had bought on the edge of the sea, and instructed Ma Tui not to leave the house with Qin Shui under any circumstances, for he was afraid that Ma Yu and Ma Lat might be conspiring against Ma Tui. They agreed, and Lord Naga set off to sea. It wasn't before long that Ma Yu and Ma Lat came calling at Ma Tui's place and said, oh, please, come with us. We're going to the bazaar to buy some rice. But Ma Tui said, oh, I have enough rice. Never mind. The next day, they came and they said, oh, please come with us. We're going to the forest to gather firewood. But Ma Tui said, no, thank you. I'm playing Cat's Cradle with Qin Shui, which I don't know if you know this, but it's like this game that you play with like strings on your hands. That seems really cool. I never played this, but it does seem like it would not make sense to be playing with a baby. So I don't know what's going on with this excuse. Anyway, Ma Yu and Ma Lat continued on their way, and then the next day they came back and they said, oh, please, Ma Tui, come with us. We're going to the spring to gather fresh water. And Ma Tui said, oh, no, I can't. I'm weaving a chinlon for Qin Shui, which is a vocab word I forgot. A chinlon, I may be saying that incorrectly, is like this reed-esque hacky sack that is like a full-on sport in Burma. It's pretty cool. There's a link in the description of the story below, so check it out. And anyway, they were going to the spring. She wouldn't come because she's weaving the chinlon, the hacky sack, and they continued on their way. Then Ma Tui didn't hear from her sisters for a number of days. She grew kind of lonely, sitting there alone with Qin Shui. And then she heard her sisters running along and laughing in the distance. Ma Tui was surprised to hear their laughter and said, oh, what's going on? Is there some festival that I didn't know about? The two sisters said, no, there is no festival. We're going to the mango tree where we used to swing as children. Ma Tui said, oh, I wish that I could come. That sounds so fun. The two sisters, we don't want you to come. You've grown rude and stubborn. You never come out and hang with us. So Ma Tui thought to herself, well, they can't be trying to trick me. They don't want me to come. And so with that, she decided to leave the confines of her house and go with Ma Yu and Ma Lat to the mango tree, where they sat and they swang, staring out over the sea and having a jolly time. Ma Lat and Ma Yu were so good with Qin Shui that eventually Ma Lat and Ma Yu took turns on the swing, and Ma Tui thought it was safe for her to give it a try as well. And Ma Yu and Ma Lat sat behind Ma Tui and Qin Shui, and they swang her and swung her and gave one big push, and the two flew into the air and into the ocean. Ma Yu and Ma Lat were thrilled with themselves because they thought, with the Lord Naga gone, that when he returned, one of the two of them would be able to marry the handsome prince and collect all of the goodies that he was bringing back. They laughed and then hurried back to their homes, thinking that it was a good job. Meanwhile, Ma Tui and Qin Shui were drowning in the ocean when a stork was flying overhead, saw them in the ground, and dripped down, gathered them in his giant claws, and carried them to his stork's nest on an island. Which, I don't know if you've ever seen a stork's nest, but they are massive. They are so big. And I really love that the story has this element of this stork that's like massive and takes these human beings up into an actual stork's nest as a part of the story. Anyway, the stork says, how lovely! What a beautiful bride you are, and what a beautiful son I have. Ma Tui tries to explain. I'm sorry, Mr. Stork. I'm actually already married, and the stork wouldn't hear anything of that. No, you're mine. You're mine. I saved you. And so Ma Tui thought, okay, I'm just not going to aggravate this bird. And before she goes to bed, she was rocking Qin Shui, and she sang a little lullaby. Oh, good night, Qin Shui, the son of the snake prince. And the stork said, no, the son of the stork, the son of the stork. Sing it right or I peck your eyes out. Ma Tui was terrified. So she grabbed Qin Shui again and started singing, oh, good night, Qin Shui, the son of the handsome stork. And Qin Shui went to bed as Stork, thrilled with himself, laughed. And so this continued, night after night after night. Each day, Ma Tui thinking of her beloved prince, hoping that one day he would be able to save her. And the stork, completely thrilled at his lucky catch. Fortunately, over time, as Prince Naga was on his way back to the village, the ship passed by the island with the stork Ma Tui and Qin Shui, and overheard the singing, oh, Qin Shui, the beautiful son of the stork, and the stork laughing. And the sailors thought that it was a siren and some kind of magical sea creature. So they called upon Lord Naga to listen to the sounds. And the second that he heard his beloved Ma Tui singing, oh, Qin Shui, he knew that it was his betrothed and his son. So he went to the island and unshielded his sword and went to attack the stork when Ma Tui said, no, wait, and explained that the stork had saved her and Qin Shui's life. Lord Naga sheathed his sword and said that he would be taking his wife and his son back home with him. And the stork said, no, of course not. I'll peck your eyes out. And the two of them argued for a good while before Lord Naga eventually got the better of his wits and said, Stork, would you rather have 500 fish or my wife and my child? And the stork said, oh, clearly 500 fish. And Lord Naga said, cool, great, we've got that. And so he sends his men off into the sea. They bring back 500 fish. The stork is fat and happy, and he takes Ma Tui and Qin Shui onto his boat, and they set off back to the village. Lord Naga is pissed. He's so mad when he hears what has happened with Ma Yu and Ma Lat, and he says, we must kill them to gather vengeance. But Ma Tui was pure of heart and said, no, we cannot kill them. It is enough for them to be made ashamed of their behavior. And so Lord Naga got the idea that he would take the chest of jewels that he had gathered on his trip, and he would hide Ma Tui and Qin Shui underneath it. And when he arrived at the village, Ma Lat and Ma Yu came rushing up to him, explaining that they were so sad to report that Ma Tui had fallen off of a cliff with Kin Shui and drowned, and to make it a little easier on him, that they would be more than happy for him to take one or both of their hands in marriage. Lord Naga put on a good show, saying, "Oh, your story has weakened me. I was bringing this big chest back home for my wife and son. I wasn't going to let any of the men in my crew carry this back to our house on the hill, for it's filled with such precious treasure that I don't believe that I can trust them to take it with them. I don't think I can carry it up anymore." Ma Yu and Malat jumped at the opportunity, thinking that they might inherit it, and said, "Oh, well, I'll carry it for you, okay?" And so they lifted the heavy chest and started carrying it up the hill. And they sweat and they sweat and they sweat, having to stop several times to take breaks as their backs ached. But they would never share it. And halfway through, when they were about to give up, Lord Naga said, "Well, since my wife is dead, I suppose that the two of you should inherit the jewels that I brought." And that brought their energy right back up, and they carried it the rest of the way up. At which point, Lord Naga said, "Fine, open up the chest and take your reward." And much to the sisters' surprise, out popped Ma Tui and Kin Shui, who laughed at them, and they were made fools of in front of their entire community. They were ashamed and ran back home. And Ma Tui, Kin Shui, and Lord Naga lived happily ever after for the rest of their days. Ma Lat and Ma Yu, though, were not so easily satisfied. They begged their mother, the widow, for a snake prince of their own. And the widow, going out every day to collect that forest wood, found eventually a snake much the same hanging on a fig tree. So she brought the snake back home and, much like before, decided to place it in a bag and put it underneath the bed of one of her daughters. She asked which of them would want it. Ma Yu said, I do, I'm the eldest." Ma Lat said, "Oh, I do, I'm the middle and the fairest." And eventually, the widow agreed that Ma Lat would be able to take the snake under her bed. And so it was. And in the middle of the night, the snake ate Ma Lat whole. And in the morning, the widow and Ma Yu were horrified to find that their sister was gone, but a giant human-filled snake remained in their place. At which point, Ma Yu decided that she was happy with the life that she had and continued to work with their mother, and those that were alive were able to make peace with the rest of their lives. The end. Cheers. I really love this story for the Five of Pentacles, because Ma Tui kind of at first thinks that she's having to marry a snake, and then it ends up being really positive, and then the whole thing kind of flips near the end. There's also this really kind of interesting patience and kindness from the main character, Ma Tui, who could be trying to seek vengeance on her family. So that was a really lovely opportunity. I had a piece of paper that I hid here, which is my gratitude for the week. And my gratitude this week goes to my retrospective process, and any of my friends that are watching now or in the future that join in the retrospectives. It's given me a lot of confidence and comfort in trying out new things this season, which has been both a challenge and very freeing. So I thank all of you, and I burn you up. Here we go. Ooh, ha, whew. Alrighty. So those of you that are going to join me next week, we've got this wonderful story. I believe it's from Lesotho. I've got The Knight of Wands, and it's a fantastic story with a really, really badass heroine who's going to come and save the day with a mythical creature that you've never heard of. So I hope you're able to join and enjoy. And with that, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you, and may you find peace. Until next week, thank you for joining me this week. Bye, y'all.